Okay, so what's the real difference between winning and losing a case? You might think it's all about having this mountain of evidence, right? But it's not. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on what really makes for a persuasive legal argument. And, it all boils down to one simple, powerful thing: the story. I mean, just picture a courtroom for a second. It's chaos, right? You've got these huge piles of complex facts, testimony that totally contradicts itself, and then 12 complete strangers who have to make this life-altering decision. So the big question is, how on earth does a lawyer cut through all that noise and actually get them on their side? Well, the answer is surprisingly simple. They tell a better story. Because that's what a courtroom really is. It's a battleground for competing stories. And victory? It doesn't always go to the side with the most facts on paper. It goes to the side whose story really connects, the one that resonates deep down with the jury. Okay, so if it's all about the story, how do you actually build a winning one? Well, the top trial lawyers, they have this kind of secret weapon. It's this core concept, no pun intended, that they use to build everything around. And they call it the case core. And the case core is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is the absolute heart of your case. It's that one central idea, that organizing principle that gives the whole thing meaning and tells you where you're going. The trial expert Greg Cusimano has this perfect way of describing it. He calls it the moral essence of your case. And that really gets to the point, doesn't it? It's not just about the dry facts of what happened. It's about the fundamental right versus wrong at the heart of the whole situation. So this moral essence sounds powerful, right? But it's not just some vague, fuzzy feeling. It's actually built from two very specific, very crucial parts that have to work together perfectly to create that story you just can't forget. And those two parts are the moral and the simple story. Let's break that down. The moral, that's the big, universal truth that everyone in the jury box just gets. It's that gut feeling that makes them nod and think, yeah, that's just not right. Then you have this simple story, which takes that feeling and turns it into a crystal clear narrative that sticks in their head. Okay, let's talk about the moral. This has to be something that everyone can agree on, no matter who they are. It has to tap into these deeply held shared values. Take something like, a hospital is supposed to help, not hurt. Man, that's powerful. It's so simple, but it immediately frames the whole case. It says the defendant broke a fundamental rule of our society. Now for part 2, the simple story. And the key word here is simple. We're talking about radical simplicity. The idea is to boil it down so much that a child could hear it and understand why it's unfair. And look, this isn't about dumbing things down. It's about being powerful enough to slice right through all the legal jargon and get straight to the human truth of it all. And here is a perfect example from one of Greg Cusimano's actual cases. Mrs. Ellison walked into the hospital for a physical examination, and 3 days later, she was rolled out with a broken back. Wow. It's just so stark. It's powerful. In one sentence, it combines that moral we just talked about, hospitals should help, not hurt, with a story that is just devastatingly simple. So this all sounds great, right? A moral and a simple story. But where do you find this stuff? Does it just come to you in a flash of genius in the middle of the night? Almost never. The reality is the process is usually a lot messier and honestly a lot more difficult than that. And that's because a great case core isn't something you invent out of thin air. It's something you discover. And a lot of the time, that discovery only happens after you've failed and failed and failed again. It's about listening, about testing your ideas, and this is the hard part, being willing to admit you were wrong. Let me give you a real-world example. Cusimano was working on this incredibly tough case, a failure to diagnose breast cancer. I mean, they had everything. The best lawyers, super expensive exhibits, the whole 9 yards. They took it to mock juries 9 times. 9. And guess what? They lost. Every single time. So what was going wrong? Well, for those first 9 losses, their moral was basically, the doctor was greedy, he put profits over people. The problem was, the jurors didn't buy it. They just saw a greedy lawyer trying to get a big payday. So they had to pivot. They completely changed the moral to the simple, undeniable principle. The level of medical care you get should at least equal the medical risk you face. So where did this game-changing idea come from? Not from the lawyers. It came directly from the mock jurors themselves. The legal team finally just stopped talking and started listening to what the focus groups were actually saying. People kept asking this one question. Why wasn't there some procedure in place? And boom, that one question unlocked the entire case. So listening to focus groups is one huge source of discovery. But there's another one, and it's often sitting right there in the chair across from you. Your own client. It sounds so obvious, right? But you'd be surprised how often lawyers get so buried in the legal weeds that they forget to just listen. Let's go back to Mrs. Ellison's case, the woman with the broken back. Her lawyer originally thought, okay, this is a pretty straightforward injury case. But one day, he just stopped asking the standard, perfunctory questions and just listened to her talk. And that's when he heard the real story. Her injury wasn't just about pain. It meant she couldn't care for her dying husband in his final weeks. Suddenly, the case wasn't about a broken back at all. It was a tragic love story. Okay, so once you've gone through all that hard work and finally discovered this case core, what now? What does it actually do for you in a trial? Well, its power is just immense. It's not just a nice slogan. It becomes a strategic tool that guides every single move you make. Think of the case core as your compass. A trial is total chaos, and the other side's entire job is to create confusion, to distract everyone with a million irrelevant details. Your case core is your true north. No matter how lost you get, it always points you, and more importantly, the jury, back to the central injustice. It keeps you on track. And here's where it gets really powerful. This is one of its most brilliant applications. A strong case core allows you to completely reframe the entire conflict. You can take what looks like one person's simple, isolated mistake and transform it into proof of a much bigger, much more dangerous broken system. Just look at this classic slip and fall example. The weak frame is, a scatterbrained woman slips on a puddle. It's so easy to blame her, right? She should have watched where she was going. But watch what happens when you use a strong frame. A national retailer didn't follow its own safety rules. See the difference? The blame shifts instantly and dramatically from the person to the system. So why is this reframing so effective? Well, according to socio-trial expert Professor Brandon Blankenship, it basically hacks our brains. See, we have this subconscious tendency to blame victims. It's a defense mechanism. If we tell ourselves they did something wrong, it makes us feel safer, like it won't happen to us. But when you shift the focus to a flawed system, you completely short-circuit that bias. Suddenly, it's not about the one person's little mistake. It's about the company's pattern of failure. And that makes it so much easier for a jury to hold them responsible. All right, let's do a quick recap of everything we've covered. First, trials are won by telling the most compelling story, point blank. Second, the foundation of that story is the case core, that powerful 1-2 punch of a universal moral and a simple story. Third, you don't make this stuff up. You discover it by actually listening to people, whether it's focus groups or your own client. And finally, you use that core as your compass to guide you and to frame the entire narrative. And that really brings us to the final big idea here. This whole concept, it's not just some clever legal tactic. Think about it. Every conflict is a story. So think about a disagreement in your own life, big or small. If you had to find the moral essence of your side, what would it be? What's the simple, compelling story you're really telling?